You might think that the witches at Salem were burned at the stake, but they weren't. Not a single one. In fact, no one in Massachusetts was ever burned at the stake for witchcraft. So where did this idea come from? And how did an entire town lose their mind because of a few young girls? Well, the Salem witch trials kicked off in 1692 in a little Puritan village outside Boston. Two girls, Betty Paris, aged 9, and her cousin Abigail Williams, aged 11, started having what the neighbors called fits. They would scream, contort, and then they claimed invisible spirits were attacking them. No one could explain it. And then more girls joined in. Ann Putnam Jr., Mercy Lewis, Mary Walcott, and then there was maybe a core group of about a dozen or so. I mean, it's just a handful of kids, really. But in a world that believed the devil walked among them, their word carried some terrifying weight. So they started naming names. The first three were easy enough targets. Sarah Good, a poor beggar, Sarah Osborne, who rarely went to church, and Tituba, an enslaved woman we think was from the Caribbean. Within weeks, the whole thing was spiraling out of control. Old grudges, jealousies, and land disputes all got wrapped up in this idea of the devil's war. In the end, about 200 people were accused. 19 were hanged, and one man, Giles Corey, was pressed to death with stones for refusing to plead. That's a grim one. Then a few others died in jail, but nobody, not a single person, was burnt at a stake. Well, why not? Well, this is because Salem followed English law. In England, witches were hanged. Burning was a continental thing, so common in parts of Germany, France, or Spain, particularly during the Inquisition. Over time, people kind of mix these stories together. So Europe's kind of burning became a myth through Salem. The trials finally ended when the madness had spread too far. I mean, I don't know how you define too far, but they did end. Basically, ministers started warning that the evidence was, well, not evidence at all, and it was complete nonsense. But this is also conveniently because some of these ministers, wives, and other powerful friends were starting to get accusations. So Governor William Phips stepped in, shut the special court down, and freed any remaining prisoners. So no, the witches of Salem weren't burned. This whole thing is a little bit of an element of social contagion to me, which I think if you looked, and not that closely, you could see elements of that with certain ideologies that are passed around today. But the idea that people were burned at the stake, well, that's a story that was borrowed from Europe. Really, when you think about it, the horror wasn't the fire, it was just the sheer level of fear through these accusations. A few frightened girls started pointing a few fingers, and an entire town lost their fucking marbles.